Welcome, dearly beloved anointed ones. Truth doesn't knock. It kicks the door off the hinges and exposes everything trying to hide behind it. Chosen one, buckle up, because this topic isn't the type that lets anybody breathe comfortably. It's not warm, it's not gentle, and it's definitely not dressed up to protect anyone's feelings. This is the kind of truth that walks in with muddy boots, no apology, and a spotlight bright enough to show every shadow people hoped you'd never notice. And here's the fact. Psychologists say humans are biologically wired to avoid unpleasant truths, even when those truths could save their lives. In other words, people would rather argue with reality than admit you were right. That's why your presence has always felt like a plot twist in their story. You weren't just the unexpected character. You were the uncomfortable revelation they were terrified was coming. What's wild is how the truth about you didn't even arrive politely. Oh no, it came stumbling in like, "Surprise, I brought receipts." It exposed people who swore they were angels, revealed intentions that were darker than a power outage, and forced masks off faces that were glued on with industrial strength denial. And the funniest part? Half of these people really believed you'd never find out. They acted like the universe wasn't a snitch with a perfect memory. They ran around confidently, almost proudly, doing things they thought would never see daylight. And now they're somewhere sweating, pacing, praying the truth has poor vision. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. This is where things get real ugly. Because the truth about your life, your battles, your mistreatment, your resilience, and your evolution isn't flattering for the people who mishandled you. It exposes every insecurity they tried to mask, every intention they tried to hide, and every lie they tried to lace around your name. You're not watching this video by coincidence. You're here because you've lived a life where the truth didn't whisper, it shouted. The truth didn't walk, it marched. And whether people liked it or not, the truth about you has finally reached the surface, dripping in revelation, shaking the room, and embarrassing every false narrative built against you. So lean in. Because what comes next, it isn't pretty, it isn't polite, but it's real. And it's going to hit with the kind of clarity people have spent years trying to avoid. This is the truth they prayed you'd never learn, and the truth they feared you'd finally speak. Number one, people weren't intimidated by your strength. They were exposed by it. Most people will never admit this, but the real reason they treated you the way they did wasn't because you were too much, too confident, or too different. The truth is simpler and a lot uglier. Your strength revealed everything they were pretending to be. You walked into rooms carrying qualities they tried to fake for years, and the moment you showed the real version, their imitation collapsed. Your presence exposed what they were lacking. Your honesty exposed their manipulation. Your resilience exposed their fragility. Your consistency exposed their laziness. And your authenticity exposed every mask they depended on to be liked. That's why they reacted so strongly. Not because you were a threat to their safety, but because you were a threat to their image. Some people spend their whole lives building a personality from borrowed confidence, staged kindness, and performative morality. Then you showed up being real without trying. You didn't dress up your character, you didn't script your words, you didn't calculate your motives. You simply lived from a place of truth. And it made them uncomfortable in ways they weren't prepared to handle. Your strength wasn't loud or aggressive. It wasn't something you even recognized in yourself at first. It was the quiet endurance you developed through pain, the clarity you earned through disappointment, and the self-respect you learned over time. But to people who relied on facades, your natural state felt like a spotlight hitting every crack in their mask. That's why they tried to shrink you, silence you, or twist your intentions. The goal was never to understand you. It was to protect the illusion they had built around themselves. You didn't break them. The truth you carried did. And instead of confronting their insecurities, they blamed you for exposing what they refused to fix. The strength they claimed to fear was actually the courage they wished they had. You weren't a threat. You were a reminder. A reminder of everything they abandoned in themselves. And that's the part that stung them the most. Number 2, you didn't outgrow them. They stopped growing long before you arrived. One of the hardest truths to accept is that the distance between you and certain people wasn't created by conflict, arguments, or misunderstandings. It was created by evolution. Yours continued, theirs didn't. People love to say you changed, but the reality is they hit pause on their growth a long time ago and expected you to do the same. When you kept moving, learning, healing, and maturing, it exposed how long they had been standing still. They became comfortable in cycles you were never meant to stay in. They normalized dysfunction because it didn't demand anything from them. They avoided accountability because it required effort, and they avoided growth because it forces people to face everything they've been running from. So when you started evolving, it disrupted the rhythm of their comfort. You weren't rejecting them. You were outgrowing the environment they refused to rise from. What made it feel personal to them is that your growth highlighted their lack of effort. People who stop developing emotionally, spiritually, or mentally will always take offense when someone close to them refuses to remain stagnant. They interpreted your elevation as arrogance. They called you distant, changed, or too ambitious, not because these things were true, but because they didn't want to confront the fact that they had abandoned their own potential. Your growth was supposed to inspire them, but instead it exposed them. It revealed how long they had been making excuses. It showed how much they relied on complacency. It called attention to the dreams they talked about but never pursued. And instead of owning their choices, they blamed you for moving forward. The truth is, you didn't leave anyone behind. They decided to stop walking, and you simply continued on your path. You didn't think you were better. You just refused to stay trapped in places where progress wasn't welcome. People who choose stagnation will always paint growth as betrayal. But the reality is, you were never meant to shrink to fit spaces that had already stopped expanding. You didn't outgrow them. They stopped growing long before you even entered their lives. Number 3, their hatred was never personal. You were just the closest target to their unresolved demons. The truth is harsh, but it needs to be said. The hostility, the jealousy, the sabotage, the attitude, the tension, none of it started with you. You were simply standing in the wrong place at the right time, close enough for their inner battles to reach you. People who haven't confronted their own trauma, insecurity, and emotional chaos often look for an outlet. And you became that outlet, not because you deserved it, but because you were available. You carried a calmness they didn't understand. You had clarity they couldn't find. You had a sense of direction they lacked. All of that made you a reflection they didn't want to face. Instead of dealing with their internal mess, they redirected their frustration toward you because it felt easier. You were the nearest surface they could throw their pain at, hoping it would stick. Most of these people were already drowning in unresolved issues long before you met them. They had disappointments they never processed, failures they never healed, and resentment they never admitted. You didn't spark their emotions, you simply exposed them. And exposure is uncomfortable for anyone who's spent their life hiding from themselves. That's why their reactions felt extreme. That's why their hatred felt out of proportion. They weren't responding to your actions, they were responding to their own reflection. You just happened to be the mirror. What made it uglier is that some of them knew you didn't deserve it. They recognized you were kind, patient, or genuine, but the chaos inside them was louder than any logic. They projected their self-hate onto you because attacking themselves felt too painful. So they used you as a stand-in for every wound they never addressed. It was never about your character. It was never about your intentions. It wasn't even about your mistakes. Their reactions were built from pain you didn't cause and battles you weren't part of. You weren't the problem. You were the trigger that revealed theirs. And the moment you understand that, their entire behavior becomes clearer, less personal, and easier to finally walk away from. Number 4, your kindness triggered them more than your boundaries ever did. People rarely admit this out loud, but your kindness caused more disruption than your boundaries ever could. Boundaries they can understand, even if they don't like them. Boundaries make sense, they're direct, and they give people something to blame. But kindness, genuine, steady, unforced kindness, that's where the real panic starts for people who depend on manipulation, insecurity, and emotional games to feel powerful. Your kindness didn't just confuse them, it exposed them. It removed their ability to twist your motives or create chaos to keep control. When you responded with clarity instead of anger, patience instead of pettiness, honesty instead of games, you stripped them of their usual strategies. Suddenly, the tricks that worked on everyone else didn't work on you. They couldn't provoke you, confuse you, or guilt-trip you. Your heart was too steady for their drama, and that scared them more than any confrontation. Some people feel safer when they can predict someone's reactions. They study patterns, weaknesses, and emotional triggers. But when they met you, nothing followed the script they expected. You didn't sink when they pushed. You didn't break when they tested you, and you didn't lash out when they crossed the line. You responded from a place of authenticity, not insecurity, and that made you impossible to control. Kindness from someone who has every reason to be cold is unsettling. It forces people to look at their own behavior without distraction. Your softness revealed their sharpness. Your understanding revealed their selfishness. Your sincerity revealed their manipulation. And rather than rise to your level, they resented you for making their character look smaller. The irony is that the same kindness they attacked was the kindness that protected you. It kept your spirit intact. It kept your conscience clean. And it kept you from becoming what they wanted you to resemble. You weren't triggering them because you were too nice. You were triggering them because your purity removed their power. Your kindness exposed the truth they were trying to hide. And for people who thrive in darkness, that light was unbearable. Number 5, they didn't want to understand you. Understanding you meant they had to admit they were wrong. The truth is simple, but it's brutal. People often didn't avoid you because your truth was complicated, confusing, or hard to grasp. They avoided you because fully understanding you would have forced them to confront something far more uncomfortable, themselves. Every perspective, every insight, every boundary you carried challenged the stories they had been telling themselves for years. Accepting your reality wasn't just inconvenient, it was threatening. It meant admitting that the version of themselves they had been proud of, or at least comfortable with, was built on lies, denial, and ignorance. Most people prefer illusion over discomfort. They cling to narratives that protect their pride and shield them from accountability. Your truth had a way of cracking those protective shells. Your clarity highlighted the discrepancies between what they believed about themselves and what was real. Understanding you would have required them to swallow humility, and swallowing humility is something many people have never been taught, or worse, have spent a lifetime avoiding. Pride is a far heavier anchor than any physical chain, and they refuse to loosen it. That's why they dismissed your words, ignored your intentions, and sometimes even vilified you. They didn't want your perspective. They wanted the safety of their own false narratives. You weren't the problem. Their refusal to see clearly was. Every time you spoke, every time you acted in alignment with your truth, it became harder for them to continue believing the comfortable fiction they had built around your character. Your very existence was a living contradiction to the excuses they relied on. The bitter irony is that their avoidance made your strength even more visible. By refusing to engage with your reality, they highlighted their weakness, insecurity, and fear of self-reflection. You weren't confusing, complicated, or unrelatable. They were unwilling to face the reflection you were holding up to them, and that refusal, that stubborn clinging to being right in the wrong ways, is what made their reactions so harsh and their inability to understand you so painfully obvious. Number 6. You were punished for the things they secretly admired. It's a hard truth, but every attack, every snide comment, every judgment they threw your way wasn't really about you. It was a reflection of themselves. People punished you, not because you were wrong, but because you were living in ways they secretly wished they could. Every insult was a confession wrapped in disguise. Your courage, the clarity of your vision, the sharpness of your intuition, and the unshakable resilience you carried. These were the very qualities they envied. But instead of admitting it, they masked their envy as criticism. When they called you too much or overconfident, it wasn't because your presence was threatening. It was because they recognized the parts of themselves they'd buried or denied. They punished you for dreaming bigger, for standing taller, for refusing to shrink to fit their insecurities. Every time they tried to cut you down, they were really trying to reconcile the uncomfortable realization that they hadn't dared to embody what you naturally possessed. Their approach is subtle, but consistent. Envy rarely admits itself. It hides behind morality, logic, and judgment, painting the victim as the problem. You became a mirror for their shortcomings, but instead of reflecting honestly, they distorted the image with criticism. They wanted you to dim, to compromise, to match the mediocrity they had settled for. But the more they punished you, the more your qualities stood out, showing the contrast between their hidden desires and your visible achievements. What makes this even more profound is that their punishment was ineffective. It couldn't erase your courage, suppress your vision, or dull your intuition. Every attempt to shame you or hold you back ended up proving the strength they feared. They didn't understand that their attacks were empty echoes of admiration turned sour, and every criticism only revealed what they lacked and what they wished they could claim for themselves. In the end, their punishment was meaningless against the force of what you carried inside. Their envy, wrapped in criticism, was powerless against your authenticity. And the ugly truth is that every word they used against you secretly confirmed your greatness. The greatness they could never admit they wanted. Number 7. They didn't mistreat you accidentally. They calculated the odds and assumed you'd never rise. The people who tried to hurt you didn't act on impulse or ignorance. Every slight, every betrayal, every reckless act was intentional. They measured you, sized up your presence, and made a calculation based on their limited imagination. In their minds, you were someone they could control, manipulate, or dismiss without consequence. They assumed you had no power, no influence, and no vision for the future. They didn't see you as a person. They saw you as a wager, a bet they were confident they could win. Arrogance fueled their actions. They mistook your patience for weakness, your silence for ignorance, and your kindness for vulnerability. Every rule they broke, every boundary they ignored, every game they played was backed by the confidence that you would never rise above it. They didn't treat you recklessly because they didn't care. They treated you recklessly because they were certain you were expendable, that your impact was temporary, and that your voice could be muted. What they failed to understand was that your life wasn't up for debate. Their assumptions underestimated your resilience, your intuition, and your timing. They believed in their ability to stunt your growth, but in doing so, they revealed the gap between who they were and who you were becoming. The arrogance that fueled their actions blinded them to your potential and every miscalculation they made only set the stage for your eventual rise. Their misjudgment was poetic. The very energy they poured into trying to diminish you became the catalyst for your strength. The recklessness they wielded against you was met with endurance, strategy, and clarity. They didn't just lose, they exposed themselves for what they were: short-sighted, desperate, and incapable of comprehending the magnitude of your destiny. In the end, their cruelty was never about your flaws. It was about their misreading of your potential. They assumed the odds were in their favor, but the universe had already placed its bet on you. And when you rose, it wasn't just a victory, it was a revelation. Every calculated attack turned into proof of their failure, and every assumption they made became a monument to your unstoppable trajectory. Number 8. Your silence didn't confuse them. It scared them. Your silence was never a sign of defeat, confusion, or uncertainty. It was the moment everything changed. The very second you stopped feeding their chaos with reactions, explanations, or emotional responses, they felt a shift they couldn't ignore. Silence from someone who finally sees the truth isn't emptiness, it's power. And they sensed it immediately. They weren't confused when you went quiet. They were rattled, because until then, they relied on your engagement to keep the cycle alive. They needed your frustration, your explanations, your attempts to fix things, your emotional investment. That was their fuel. It helped them maintain the illusion of control. But the moment you stepped back and cut off the supply, the game they built collapsed in their hands. Your silence forced them into a situation they never prepared for, dealing with themselves. With no distractions, no arguments, no reactions to twist, they were left face to face with their own intentions and behavior. That's a confrontation many people avoid at all costs. It's easier for them to blame you when you're speaking than to face their truth when you're silent. The truth is, silence reveals character. Yours showed strength, clarity, and maturity. Theirs showed insecurity, fear, and guilt. They weren't scared of losing you. They were scared that you finally saw them clearly. They knew your silence wasn't an accident. It was a decision, a line drawn, a declaration that you would no longer participate in their dysfunction. Your distance disrupted the rhythm they depended on. It removed their ability to manipulate, push buttons, or redirect blame. For the first time, they had to sit with the consequences of their actions, and that is a punishment they were never ready for. Silence exposed what words could never touch, their fear that you outgrew the chaos they thrive in. So no, your silence didn't confuse them. It terrified them, because silence, when it comes from someone who finally understands their worth, is the loudest truth they'll ever hear. Number 9, they claimed you were difficult because you stopped accepting their bare minimum. When people called you difficult, it wasn't because you suddenly became hard to love, hard to talk to, or hard to understand. It was because you stopped accepting the crumbs they were comfortable offering. As long as you ignored your own needs, minimized your feelings, and overextended yourself to keep the peace, they were perfectly fine. They enjoyed the version of you that didn't require effort, accountability, or reciprocity. But the moment you started choosing yourself, everything shifted, and they didn't like the shift one bit. People who benefit from your self-neglect always react negatively when you begin to honor your worth. Suddenly, your boundaries look like rebellion, your self-respect looks like attitude, your standards look like ego, and your voice looks like defiance. They weren't used to you valuing yourself, so they labeled the change as a problem. Not because the change was wrong, but because the change inconvenienced them. What really stung them was the realization that the old version of you, the one who tolerated disrespect, accepted excuses, and absorbed mistreatment, was gone. You weren't bending over backward anymore. You weren't explaining yourself 20 times. You weren't letting things slide just to keep the relationship comfortable for them. And that forced them to do something they never wanted to do. Step up or step out. Your standards didn't push away the people who were meant for you. They filtered out the ones who were only around because you didn't require anything from them. Raising your expectations exposed their intentions, their character, and their level of investment. The moment you said, "I deserve better," every person who had been coasting on your generosity felt threatened. And instead of rising to meet you, they blamed you for growing. You weren't being difficult. You were being fair to yourself for the first time in a long time. And that alone separated the genuine from the opportunistic. It revealed who valued your presence and who only valued your silence. It showed who was there for your heart and who was there for what your heart offered them. Calling you difficult was never about you. It was their final attempt to shame you back into accepting less. But you didn't fall for it. You walked forward, and the ones who truly cared walked with you. Number 10. Their biggest fear was that someone else would discover who you really are. They were never protecting you. They were protecting the version of you they invented, because it was the only place where they had any power. They knew your value long before you did. They saw the way people naturally gravitated toward you, how your presence shifted atmospheres, how your authenticity exposed their performative confidence. Their fear wasn't losing the relationship. It was losing control of the narrative. They knew the moment one person with influence, one person with eyes that truly see, or one person with discernment came near you, it would be obvious that you were never the problem. Your glow is dangerous to people who benefit from your dimming. That's why they went on a full-time mission to mislabel you, misunderstand you, and misrepresent you. They weren't trying to destroy you. They were desperately trying to hide you, because once the world sees your real self, your depth, your power, your clarity, your heart, the illusion collapses. Every lie breaks. Every manipulation loses oxygen. The rank they held over you evaporates. And here's the part they could never admit. The only reason their version of you ever stood a chance was because you didn't know your own value yet. But now the truth is leaking through every crack they tried to seal. Your energy is too loud. Your purpose is too undeniable. Your growth is too visible. People are beginning to see you with their own eyes, not through the foggy filter of someone else's insecurity. And the more they try to defend the lie, the more suspicious they look, because their obsession keeps exposing their fear. You were never hidden because you lacked value. You were hidden because your value was too great, and they knew what would happen once the world caught on, and now the world is catching on. Number 11. They tried to break your spirit because they knew they could never match your destiny. There's a level of hostility that doesn't come from misunderstanding you. It comes from recognizing you. They saw your future long before you stepped into it. They noticed the way life kept aligning for you even when circumstances looked broken. They sensed the weight of your calling, the scale of your potential, the magnitude of your energy. And instead of being inspired by it, they were threatened by it. People don't attack what they don't envy, and they don't sabotage what they don't fear. There's a specific kind of cruelty that only shows up when someone realizes your destiny is something they could never manufacture for themselves. It's the cruelty of desperation, the kind where their entire identity is built on keeping you small because they know they can't rise with you. Their mission was never to win. They knew they couldn't. Their goal was to ensure that you didn't win either. They wanted to fracture your confidence because they couldn't duplicate it. They wanted to exhaust your spirit because they couldn't outwork it. They wanted to distort your self-image because they couldn't compete with your authenticity. They needed you discouraged, doubting, and distracted, because a chosen one who believes in themselves is unstoppable. Their attacks were strategic. They weren't fighting you, they were fighting your trajectory. The path you were born for terrified them because it exposed the limits of their own existence. They tried to weaken the foundation of your identity because they saw the skyscraper forming before you ever saw the blueprint. But here's the part that always backfires. When a destiny is written, no amount of human insecurity can rewrite it. Their cruelty only sharpened your purpose. Their sabotage only clarified your direction. Their envy only revealed the spiritual rank they were trying to hide from you. You weren't being attacked because you were weak. You were attacked because they saw the version of you that you hadn't become yet. And nothing is more terrifying to insecure people than watching someone evolve into what they always feared you had the potential to be. Number 12. The betrayal hurt. Not because they lied, but because you finally realized they'd been studying your weak spots. The wound wasn't created by the lie. It was created by the intention behind it. You didn't just wake up to deception. You woke up to the fact that someone had been quietly taking notes on your vulnerabilities. They weren't reacting in the moment, they were preparing. They watched how you loved, how you forgave, how you explained yourself even when you didn't have to. They noticed what softened you, what discouraged you, what made you hesitate. And instead of protecting those parts of you, they weaponized them. That's where the real pain comes from. The realization that someone wasn't just careless. They were calculated. They weren't confused. They were deliberate. They were building trust with one hand and gathering ammunition with the other. Every smile, every apology, every promise was part of a strategy designed to get deeper access, not to build a genuine bond. Betrayal feels different when you understand the timeline. It wasn't one moment. It was a slow collection of observations. They didn't just break your heart. They studied the safest entrance to get to it. They waited for the moment you were most unguarded, not because they loved you, but because your guard dropping made their strike easier. And what makes this truth so ugly is the clarity you gain afterwards. You start replaying conversations, noticing how they paid attention to your fears, how they encouraged you to open up, how they asked questions that felt caring at the time, but now feel like research. You realize they weren't with you to understand you. They were with you to map you. But the irony is this: people who study your weak spots always underestimate your strength. They thought exposing your vulnerabilities would give them permanent power, but all it did was bring you into a higher level of awareness. You didn't just lose them, you lost the illusion that they were ever on your side. And in that loss, you gained something far more valuable: the ability to see the difference between someone who grows with you and someone who gathers information to destroy you. The betrayal didn't break you. It revealed who was never meant to sit near your unguarded heart again. Number 13. You didn't lose friends. You lost people who were surviving off your light like parasites. The separation never meant you were unlucky or unlovable. It meant you finally unplugged people who were draining you without ever offering anything back. These weren't friends. They were emotional freeloaders feeding off your kindness, your insight, and your strength. They clung to you because being near you made them feel stable, important, and guided. The moment you stepped back, everything they pretended to have suddenly vanished, because none of it belonged to them in the first place. Your presence was their power source. You were the one who encouraged them when they were lost, supported them when they were overwhelmed, and lifted them when they sank under their own choices. They liked the version of themselves they got to perform when they were beside you, not the version they actually were. You weren't supposed to notice that the friendship only flowed in one direction. You weren't supposed to realize they never checked on you with the same urgency you checked on them. But life has a way of showing you who's real and who's just rehearsing loyalty. When you walked away, they didn't miss you. They missed the benefits. They missed the comfort, the answers, the emotional warmth, the stability you naturally carry. Your silence forced them to face a truth they had avoided for years. They had no inner light of their own, just enough entitlement to assume they deserved yours forever. But parasites don't survive when the host heals. And the moment you reclaimed your energy, your time, and your emotional capacity, their worlds grew quiet. Not because you punished them, but because the illusion they built couldn't exist without your contributions. Losing them wasn't a loss, it was freedom. You didn't walk away from people who loved you. You walked away from people who only loved the way you made them feel. Your light was never the problem. Their dependence was. And now that your energy is no longer being siphoned by people who offered nothing in return, you're growing into the strength they hoped you'd never recognize. Number 14, God allowed you to see the darkness in people, so you'd never again apologize for your light. The revelation you went through wasn't meant to break you, it was meant to graduate you. Life didn't expose the darkness in people so you'd become bitter. It exposed it so you'd become wiser. You were pulled into situations that showed you exactly how far envy can go, how twisted insecurity can become, and how ruthless someone can be when they feel threatened by your existence. It wasn't random, and it wasn't cruelty. It was instruction. You were being taught a language most people never learn, the language of hidden intentions. You learned how someone could smile and still resent you, how someone could praise you publicly but pray for your downfall silently, how someone could stay close not to love you but to monitor you. These experiences weren't punishments. They were lessons in discernment that only the spiritually awake receive. The truth is, your light has always been loud, even when you didn't realize it. Your spirit, your grace, your strength, your resilience, they've always unsettled people who rely on power games and manipulation. You weren't aware of it then, so you tried to shrink. You tried to soften your shine. You apologized for being gifted, intuitive, kind, or perceptive. But God knew you needed a shock to stop treating your light like a burden. So you were shown the darkness up close, not to traumatize you, but to calibrate you, to sharpen your intuition, to fine-tune your boundaries, to teach you what loyalty looks like and what deception smells like. Once you've seen the shadow side of human nature, you stop entertaining people who think they deserve access just because they show up. And that's the beauty behind the pain. After witnessing the darkness in others, you finally understand the value of what you carry. You don't apologize for being radiant anymore. You don't minimize your gifts. You don't make yourself small so others can feel tall. The exposure wasn't a setback. It was a divine elevation. You were educated in truth so you could step into your purpose without ever again dimming your light to make the unworthy comfortable. Conclusion. Chosen. 1. After walking through all of this, the picture becomes crystal clear. Nothing you endured was random, nothing you faced was meaningless, and nothing they tried to do to you could truly stop the trajectory you were born for. Every slight, betrayal, insult, and manipulation you experienced wasn't a reflection of your worth. It was a mirror showing the cracks, insecurities, and limitations of those around you. They weren't fighting you. They were battling the reflection of the strength, courage, and destiny they could never claim for themselves. Your journey has been one of revelation, initiation, and awakening. You weren't just surviving. You were being prepared, refined, and educated in ways most people will never understand. Every time someone tried to dim your light, it only made it shine brighter. Every attempt to hold you back became proof that you were moving in alignment with your true purpose. Every betrayal, every lie, and every attack became a lesson in discernment, teaching you to recognize loyalty, authenticity, and divine alignment when it finally appeared. What's remarkable is that you've emerged unbroken. Not just unbroken, but untouchable in spirit, unshakable in confidence, and unstoppable in destiny. You didn't shrink to fit their comfort zones. You didn't soften your truth to make them feel safe. You didn't apologize for being exactly who you were meant to be, and that alone is the ultimate victory. They tried to write the story for you, but the pen was always in your hands. You were never a victim of circumstance. You were the author of your resilience, the architect of your awakening, and the living proof that truth, integrity, and purpose always prevail. Now is the moment to recognize what this journey truly means. The pain, the trials, the betrayals, and the lessons were all intentional, designed to elevate you to a level where your light can no longer be hidden or ignored. You've been initiated, refined, and positioned to move forward with clarity, strength, and wisdom that shakes the very foundations of mediocrity around you. If this message resonates with you, if you feel the weight of your journey and the power of your growth, then stand proud in it. Let it remind you that your story is extraordinary and your light is unstoppable. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave a comment sharing your experience, and share it with someone who needs this truth. Your journey matters, your voice matters, and your story is one the world needs to see. God bless you.